So you said that you can look to God for wisdom to make sense of the world. There's a lot of stuff to us humans that's difficult to make sense of, um, like you losing your mother. There's a lot of cruelty in the world. There's a lot of suffering in the world. What wisdom uh, have you been able to find from God about why there is suffering in the world, why there's cruelty?
There's a saying that I wanted to ask God about why he allows hunger and war and poverty, but I was afraid he might ask me the same question. God has certainly given us enough food. There's enough food in the world for everyone to have a 3,200 calorie diet a day. God has certainly given us enough guidance for us to not inflict on each other the cruelty that we inflict. When we look to the world around us, first and foremost, we have to have a sense of accountability. We are accountable for our own actions. We don't blame God for the evil of man. That's one. But at the same time, we understand that God in his wisdom allows for certain outcomes that we cannot encompass with our own. And that to isolate these incidents and to try to make sense of them is no different than a baby in the womb that doesn't understand the world that it's coming into and trying to explain to that baby that hasn't yet developed its own senses and its own perception of this world what is happening to it, right? I often think of the example of a child and, having uh, been at this point now through the experience of parenthood. I'm still learning. I'm just going into having a teenager, but three kids and being a softie for my kids, when you have to tell your child that they can't have something that they really, really want. And that child thinks you hate them at some point, because why are you stopping me from putting this toy in my mouth and choking me myself? They don't get it, right? But at the same time, you prevent them out of love. They're not in a position to understand that you're preventing them out of love. And to isolate these incidents with God and to say, the wisdom, what's the wisdom? You're trying to make sense of a pixel when you can't see the bigger picture. Your mind is not at a place where you can make sense of the bigger picture. You haven't seen the bigger picture. And so, for him to even explain to us every incident would completely defeat the purpose of putting your trust in him. So, we believe in a God that is all encompassing in his knowledge and wisdom that gives us, and Islam is very specific, by the way, that there is what God tells us to do and there's what God allows to happen. So what God tells us to do in terms of the roadmap towards good, and then what God allows to happen in his divine wisdom, that no outcome can escape him, but at the same time we are accountable for our own actions and our own deeds. So when you come to someone and say, why did God allow this to happen to this person? I can't rationalize that for you because my understanding is relegated to the immediate experience in front of me. But if I know God and if I learn about God, then I don't have to make sense of the plan, but I can tell you that I trust the planner. And I think that that's where peace is found. A lot of times you look for the light at the end of the tunnel. What's the light at the end of the tunnel? In Islam, there's emphasis on God and the hereafter, because to try to make sense of divine decree and why certain things happen in this world without the existence of a God or without the existence of a hereafter will always fail you. So the existence of a God that is all knowing what we don't know. I know what you don't know, that understands what we don't understand. The existence of a God who is not subject to our constrictions, and the existence of a hereafter where all things find recourse, where there's divine recourse, allows for this world to be situated within the existence of something greater and not treated in isolation. So when you're trying to treat an incident of this world in isolation, you're going to fail. And when you try to treat existence in this world and of this world in isolation, you're also going to fail. And so the emphasis is the belief in God. a God that is not limited like you are, and a belief in the hereafter that is not limited like this life. And so everything continues onwards, and there's divine recourse for everything, each and everything. You know, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, mentions that on the day of judgment, a person who lived the most difficult of lives will be dipped into paradise one time and will be told, have you ever seen any sadness, any hardship? Now, when you think about the most difficult life, some of the commentators in Islam, they said that this is perhaps referring to the prophet Job, Ayub, peace be upon him, because Job lived obviously a life of great difficulty, but that a person who lived a very hard life would be dipped into paradise one time, and just with a dip be asked, have you ever seen any hardship? Have you ever seen any misery? And that person would say, what is sadness? What is hardship? What is misery? Now, if you don't believe in the hereafter, if you don't believe in anything beyond this life, then the recourse has to happen in this life. And because we see so many people pass through this life without recourse of cruelty, without recourse of suffering, then we're forced to try to make sense of it. And if you are someone who believes that this entire world came into existence through randomness, that we're just an existence of random atoms that collide with each other, and that all of this comes together out of nothing, then how can you put your trust in anything that is greater? So you asked me as a child of a parent who suffered, I believe that every moment that my mother suffered, that she will be rewarded, that she will be elevated, that all of that made her or contributed to the beautiful person that she was, and will contribute to the beautiful reward that she receives. And the recourse is certain to me as a believer in that.